If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Doogie.
Sam.
Borussia Dortmund have fallen apart, and I think we should explore exactly why that is and what has led them here.
Dortmund just not at the races. Perez has Ben Hartson in the middle! History beckons for Kiel, who are 3-0 up at the break.
The outlook is potentially a bit scary. If Dortmund don't sort things out soon, that loss of European money will really, really hurt them.
2 goals in 2 minutes have turned this game around against last year's beaten finalists.
Sky in Germany reporting that Borussia Dortmund have sacked their head coach, Nuri Sahin, after just 7 months in charge.
Yeah, it was coming this, you felt, wasn't it? Final game, it looks like it was that 2-1 defeat to Bologna.
Yes, hello everybody, welcome to another episode of The Truth. Our European tour continues. From Atalanta to a double stop in Madrid, to Naples, and now to Dortmund. We've not been home in weeks. Awesome. My suitcase is starting to get pretty heavy though. There's a lot of dirty clothes in there. We need to go home soon, but this week is not that week. Joining me to talk about the demise of Dortmund is my dependable, debonair friend, Doogie.
Oh, I love that. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, no, I'm pumped for this topic. Have you noticed that since we started saying that Mbappe wasn't as bad as people made out as well, he's been on quite a run of form in the last month and a half or so. So that's definitely aged well. But I'm looking forward to getting stuck into Borussia Dortmund. It might not be quite as positive.
Atletico did not win at the weekend, though.
That is a very good point.
And I was gutted. Absolutely gutted. I thought, well, if just Las Palmas could... No, never mind.
Such a poor penalty as well.
Yeah, really bad. Griezmann of all people. Unbelievable. Well, anyway, I digress. I just want to introduce our producer, voice of God, Jack Collins, to the table as well.
I don't get any sort of alliteration. Is that how it works now?
Jay is harder.
Jay is harder.
No, it is harder.
Jazzy.
I just,
Jazzy. DJ Jazzy Jeff. That's not one I'm going to take, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Hello, Sam. How you doing?
I'm good. You must be distraught. Notre Dame super fan, Jack Collins.
Well, I did stay up till 4 a.m. to watch the college football playoff final last night. That was a bad decision on my part, but alas, here we are.
Yeah, never mind. And I'll just say that you're all lucky to get a podcast at all this week. I attempted to cancel all global content for the entire week to appropriately mourn Detroit's defeat. I failed. I haven't even turned up in black.
No, you've not done a very good job with this whole morning thing, actually. At least I'm all in black.
You've also seemed pretty chipper before we've started recording as well. What's going on?
Yeah.
Is it deep down, the pain?
I think it's just because I spent a couple of days in a dark cave, and having emerged, I'm now seeing the light. And here we are. Look, the show must go on. Good luck to the Washington Commanders, all that rubbish. Right, let's talk about Borussia Dortmund. And we'll start with a disclaimer. We're recording about an hour before they play Bologna in the Champions League, which, according to many, many reports, is manager Nuri Sahin's last chance. If they lose tonight, Tuesday night, then by the time you listen to this, he may well have been sacked. Granted, a win could bring some reprieve, but there's already reports out there that Roger Schmidt and Erik ten Hag have been contacted with a view to taking the job, possibly, and a few others too as well. Stuttgart's manager, a few others. Yeah, there's quite a lot of names actually, which is very much a no smoke without fire. The writing seems like it's on the wall, Doogie. So we have pursued with this topic anyway, regardless of what happens midweek. Dortmund have got themselves into quite the mess, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's still relevant no matter what happens, whether they beat a fairly poor Bologna side or not, because it's clear that things are not as they should be at Dortmund. They probably haven't been for a little while, and there are a multitude of reasons for that. But for anyone who's around our age, which is around the age of 30, Borussia Dortmund really are Germany's second best known team. They've got 5 Bundesliga titles to their name. They are level with Gladbach as the second most in the league's history. Bayern have won 32 of 60 Bundesliga titles. So it does go to show that there is quite a gap between them. They are not Germany's second most successful side, but since the introduction of the Bundesliga, they clearly are. And no side has been runner-up more times than Dortmund's 11 in German football history. So you get the picture. They are a big name, but they are very much struggling at the moment. They've lost their last 3 Bundesliga games. They lost 3-2 versus Leverkusen, 4-2 versus Holstein Kiel. That is not supposed to happen. And 2-0 away at Eintracht Frankfurt on Friday. Eintracht Frankfurt, Omar Marmoush not able to play as he sort of finalises that move to Man City. That is a bad result too.
Yeah, that was seen as a bit of a gift, wasn't it? Like, oh, lucky Dortmund, they get to play Eintracht without Marmoush. Didn't help.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means that they've now only won 1 of their last 7 league games. They sit 10th. They are 20 points off leaders Bayern Munich. They are 7 off 4th place Stuttgart. And there is a lot of speculation, as you pointed out, around their manager. But Sam, where I think we should probably go next is what I kind of hinted at, that this isn't potentially anything brand new. This Dortmund side, did amazingly to reach the Champions League final last year, but domestically it was a poor campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to call last season's run to the Champions League final a bit of a red herring. You might use that as a barometer for success. You might look at that and go, they're in pretty good shape, right? Champions League finalists. I mean, it's not exactly easy to get to that game. And you know what? Until the late era that kind of iced it, they were well in that game as well. They turned up, and that was the theme of it, wasn't it, for the run to the Champions League? They turned up. I'm not going to sit here and say that they were lucky to get to the final, because I think they did tremendously well to beat PSG over 2 legs. They did tremendously well to roar back against Atletico Madrid, going 2-0 down in the tie first up, and scoring that late away goal, and then coming through and finishing the job at home. Like, well done to them, and they were really good. They really pumped themselves up for those big occasions. But in between those occasions, so the normal run-of-the-mill league games, they were really poor. And they finished 5th in the league. They made the Champions League again this season solely because of the new format and the German coefficient being strong enough to allow 5 teams to get into the tournament. So presumably, given it's the new format, that is the first time that's ever happened, right? Someone was going to have to be the first team that got into the Champions League in 5th place, and it was Dortmund. So in that sense, they're probably lucky to be back. So if you separate those two things, you can start to see that actually, maybe what we're witnessing right now under Nuri Sahin has been coming, and the Champions League form you can almost put to one side a little bit, because the true Dortmund was what we saw back end of last season in the league. Not good enough.
Not good enough at all. And I think it's worth going back to 22-23, really, because it was such a dramatic season in Dortmund's recent history. So although they only finished with 71 points, that's a tally they've topped 4 times since 2010, it was a remarkable season. So they lost Haaland and Akanji that summer. And I think most observers, most neutrals thought, they are going to really struggle. But they brought in Haller, they brought in Adeyemi, they brought in Schlotterbeck, Salih Ozcan, who was very highly rated at the time, hasn't really worked out, Matthias Süle. And they were as low as 6th in mid-November after winning 8 of their opening 15 games. But then they only lost 1 of their next 19, and they ended up scoring 4 or more in 7 of those games. Jude Bellingham was absolutely phenomenal, but it was a real team effort. 6 players, Brandt, Marlon, Haller, Bellingham, Reina and Moukoko, all scored between 7 and 9 goals. And it comes down to the final day. If they beat Mainz at home, who finished the season 9th, and this was a team that they'd beaten 4 times in a row going into this game, they'd be champions. They go 2-0 down in classic Dortmund fashion within 24 minutes. Guerrero scores in the 69th minute, Süle in the 96th, and it's 2-2. Musiala scores in the 89th minute away at Köln to seal a 2-1 win and an 11th straight title for Bayern Munich. And it felt like the scenes on the pitch, they were at home, the yellow wall, it was a very, very emotive occasion. They were led by Edin Terzic, a former member of the Yellow Wall, a Dortmund fan who had been assistant, and he's come back and he'd done his second spell in charge. Borussia Dortmund were crushed, and Bellingham leaves that summer, and 23-24, Dortmund were never higher than 4th. As you say, they eventually finished 5th. And even in the summer, another key player leaves in Marco Reus, and Nicholas Füllkrug leaves, their top scorer. Their second top scorer from last season, Daniel Marlon, has just left to join Sam's club. So it just feels like that was their chance. Really, that was their chance in the post-Klopp era to get that title. Bayern haven't been where they've wanted to be up until this season in the Bundesliga for a little while, and that was crushing.
Yeah, so that title win for Bayern, squeaking it through with that Musiala goal, and Dortmund obviously just screwing things up on the final day. Bayern almost felt embarrassed to win that title. The feeling I got from that was, yes, obviously they were elated and delighted at the final whistle, but Thomas Tuchel was on the verge of an absolute disaster there, taking sort of temporary charge of Bayern Munich, crashing out of the Champions League post Julian Nagelsmann, and almost losing the league, which is generally unacceptable for Bayern Munich. You cited the stats, basically half the league titles are theirs. It's really not okay for Bayern not to win the title. And Tuchel nearly got there. It took Musiala and it took Dortmund to play their part too, unfortunately. And I remember Bellingham was injured for that game, that final day, and once you got the news that Bellingham wasn't going to be okay, he'd been playing lately with a sort of big strapping on his thigh, big question marks over his fitness, and he wasn't good to go. Immediately from the off, you were like, oh, wait, Jude Bellingham's not fit to play on the final day. It's got all the makings of what I would probably just label a Dortmund disaster. And the fact that we can call it something like that, the fact that it actually has like a tag and name, probably tells its own story. This is a team that is able to snatch misery from the jaws of happiness quite often. And a team like Dortmund, the way they're built and the way they run, they're not going to be challenging for the title every single season, particularly not in the post-Klopp era, which was just a bit special. So when those opportunities do actually come round, which is probably roughly every 3 years, you've got to take them. And obviously they didn't. And it hasn't got any better from there. Last season was very poor, obviously, in 5th. And now they're down in 10th. They've returned from the winter break. You'd think that would be the time where they would figure a few things out. They have lost all 3 games that they've played. I'm very willing to give them a pass for the Leverkusen defeat because they had 2 academy products, very young players in defence that night, and Julian Rierson, a fullback, was playing centre-back. So, look, Leverkusen are just better than Dortmund, regardless of the fact that 3/4 of the defence was missing, so okay. But then they go 3-0 down at half-time away to Holstein Kiel, which is an absolute joke. It's an absolute joke. They've got the smallest budget in the league. They've definitely got the worst pitch in the league. I don't know if you saw the highlights of that one. I watched it through to take a look at Dortmund. I know the pitch was boggy, but I mean it's boggy for everyone, right? Some of these goals that they conceded were just horrific. I want to talk you through some of them because I watched them back and I got really angry. The first one is Ben Sebaini, he's playing so badly at the moment, it almost defies belief. Not to just pin it all on one guy, but he's going to come up a lot in the next 5 minutes. Ben Sebaini takes a very dangerous throw in. He's midway through his own half, left side, and throws a square ball into Julian Brandt, who needs to control a bouncing ball on a rubbish pitch with it bouncing up against him, and he's obviously facing goal. And of course it gets pounced on, and of course the ball is in the top corner. 5-6 seconds later. The second goal, I watched 3 Dortmund players all watch the ball fall out of the sky to an unchallenged Holstein Kiel player, passes it to a winger who's unmarked, slams it in the box. Emre Can beaten for a header. He needs to stop playing centre-back. 2-0. Third one, Mecha loses the ball in the attacking half, and then 5 seconds later it's in the back of the net. And it really reminded me of Ranks FC favourite Harry Brooks, Coach Harry, said to me not long ago when he was watching Dortmund and we were just having a chat. He said, "It's not hard to beat Dortmund. You just have to stand there and wait for them to give you the ball." And it unfortunately it kind of sums it up. They're very silly. They play very silly football. They expose themselves massively to counter-attacks. They don't use the ball very well in the final third. They don't have too many ideas. And last Friday, Eintracht Frankfurt tuned into that one, hoping for a really good game. First blow is that Omar Mamouche is not playing, so that's unfortunate. But a couple of notes to make on that one too. First minute of the game. I'm a big believer in starting as you mean to carry on. Unfortunately, in Dortmund's case, they stay,
rarely happens.
They stay well. They do start as they mean to carry on. Terribly, unfortunately. Kobel gets the ball, goalkeeper, and just tries to play that very dangerous pass into the central midfielder and just passes it outside of Pascal Gross's body and his reach, and ends up being a chance on goal in like 45 seconds. The first goal that happens, Ben Sebaini is like trotting back from a forward run, and Rasmus Christensen, who, as Jack will know, I don't think is particularly good. Well, even he can look good when he's in 40 yards of space across a ball, right? And the guy that Dortmund actually dismissed a few years ago, not good enough for us, Ansgar Knauf, he had a field day against this team. Hit the post, he played really well. He stepped in for Marmouche and played with Mario Götze just off Ugo Ekitike. They were great, absolutely great. So again, you look at all the stats, they look really poor. And then you watch the games and you're like, this is not a proper team. And it does not marry up to the image of Borussia Dortmund that we all have in our heads because of the team they've been for the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, they've underachieved for a long time, and there's very few sides in Europe that I think appear to be, and I hate really attacking people's mentality when you don't know the insides out, but appear to be so weak and fragile mentally. It doesn't take a lot for Dortmund's rhythm to be completely upset. It doesn't take a lot for Dortmund to concede a goal. That is really schoolboy stuff. I know people often say that about Ange Postecoglou and Spurs. I think Dortmund do it far more often than Spurs, and they've done it for years as well. And it just feels like they've been crying out for a really dominant central midfielder with a bit of defensive nous, and it was supposed to be Ozcan, but he's just never really clicked at that Dortmund side. And even in the summer, signing Pascal Gross is a brilliant player, but again, that's not fixing the key issues.
To be honest, I'm actually really surprised that of all coaches, Nuri Sahin, remember the player that he was, how he hasn't managed to design a system around Pascal Gross that works. Like, you just think of as a combination that would actually happen.
Worth pointing out here that he did have a bit of a masterstroke, might be a bit of a strong phrase, but earlier in the season, basically playing Lucas Nemecha deep in the midfield really worked for him. Like, it really did become a thing, and he was the player that sat in there deepest and then basically ended up being the deep line playmaker, if you will, in this Dortmund side. And for a couple of games, suddenly it was like, oh, they've worked it out. They've got someone who's able to progress the ball in those areas. He can carry, he can spin out of pressure. There was a lot to really like about it. And all of those positive aspects that came about. And everyone was like, wow, Sahin was made into this player, and then suddenly he's turned Lemaitre into this player, and everyone's having a great day. And then you're like, oh, that lasted all of 3 weeks, and everyone's back to normal again. And I think you're right. Like, how Sahin hasn't worked out this midfield is the biggest black mark against him as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, there is a lot of pressure on him, to be clear as well. I was reading Seb Stafford-Bloor in The Athletic earlier, and there's been a few relatively outlandish comments from some former football. Mario Basler. I mean, remember...
Does he stuck the knife in?
Yeah, apparently he does this constantly.
The Baz knife.
The Baz knife. Apparently he is quite outspoken, so I don't know what our English parallel would be, but...
I think that is classic German punditry, though, as well. I think Didi Hamann, the quotes that I read from him on a weekly basis are kind of nuts.
Yeah, that's true.
Same with Rafael van der Vaart in the Netherlands as well. I think they are way more public on the continent.
Yeah, they are, fair enough. And I thought Roy Keane was rude. No. There you go. But yeah, look, there's been a lot of pressure there, and the directors of football and the sporting directors and those guys, they all come out after every game, and they all sit there and defend Nuri Sahin. And as recently as last week, Sebastian Kehl steps out, former Dortmund midfielder, really good one, steps out and goes, look, no, Nuri Sahin's not a discussion. We're not talking about him. We're looking at the players here. The players need to look at themselves. That's the problem. And I don't really agree with that. So obviously they've leaked talent over the last 2 or 3 seasons, and we can come back to the makeup of the way Dortmund's front office is comprised. But let's just dip into the transfers and the squad building here, because I think that's probably the source of the issue. Dortmund, we can't expect them to challenge when they don't behave like a club that wants to challenge. So what have they done over the last few years? They've sold really, really good players. They've sold Erling Haaland, they've sold Jude Bellingham, and they simply have not replaced any of those players like for like. They're doing a very sustainable thing where they're running a model where they go and buy really good young players, be it Jamie Gittins or Julian Duranville or whoever it is, fine. But the overall quality of the squad has just gradually decreased by 10% in the last 2 or 3 years. And it has left them with, on paper, at best, the 4th best squad in the Bundesliga, probably more like 5th, maybe even 6th, genuinely. Like, Bayern and Leverkusen are obviously better, Leipzig are obviously better, and Stuttgart and Eintracht would suggest that they're better too. So in that sense, we can frame the debate and say, well, what can we expect from Dortmund? They're not building squads like challengers. They went into this season, they didn't have enough fullbacks. They just went into the season with 3 fullbacks and thought, that'd be fine. And went in with 4 centre-backs, but one of them is Niklas Süle, who can't run more than 20 yards without pulling a muscle. Like, this is not a team that is being built to do anything other than just kind of flounder, in my opinion.
100%. And we'll go back to the manager in a second, but I think the spending is a really good point, because over the last 5 seasons, Dortmund have made a net profit of just under 26 million euros. 10 clubs in the Bundesliga have spent more than them. And look, it's a really fiscally responsible league in many ways. Like Bayern have spent 203 million euros in that time. They can afford to. The finances in Bayern is completely different to the rest of the league.
Didn't they just get like $1 billion from somewhere or something?
It's mad.
Yeah.
Wolfsburg over 105. Gladbach, Union Berlin, Leverkusen and Holstein Kiel are the only sides in the red in that time. And Leverkusen, 8 million euros in the red. Gladbach, 32. None of these clubs, except for Bayern and Wolfsburg to some degree in the last 5 years, are really in trouble anywhere close to what they've been spending, or like spending way over. Leipzig and Eintracht Frankfurt have made a net profit in that time, which does go to show they've sold really effectively. I mean, Eintracht Frankfurt just getting more money for Marmouche, but Jovic and Haller and Kolomwani, etc. Leipzig have sold so effectively.
Nobody sells like Eintracht. It's unbelievable how good they are at selling players at the peak of their powers for like peak money. The fact that Marmouche is not their most expensive sale ever because they sold Kolomwani to PSG a couple of weeks. But think about it. Luka Jovic, Sebastian Haller, like the entire squad, Philip Kostic.
Yeah.
Like they sold them all for so much money, and they're so good. How many of those players went on and succeeded afterwards? And that's not to be down on Marmouche or City fans, because I think he's excellent. I think it's going to be fun, but that's what we used to think about Dortmund like, right? Like, and that is worth pointing out. We used to think of Dortmund as this kind of quite clever stepping stone club that used to sell players at the right time and do things in the right kind of way. And now we're talking about Eintracht Frankfurt as that. And the fact is, you said there about squads. I think you're absolutely right in that Dortmund are no longer in that bracket with Bayern and Leverkusen, and probably even Leipzig. As you say, bad as Leipzig have been this season, that's a whole different question. But you now have them and you look at that squad and you'd put them in that category, be like, yeah, you're challenging for either the last Champions League place or you're looking at a stint in the Europa League. And maybe that would do them some good. I don't know.
I mean, look, you say as bad as Leipzig have been there, and I'll just draw the comparison that even Leipzig, who we can all agree have been way off colour this season, just really weird patches of form. I look at the away form here, and this is really telling for Dortmund, and it kind of syncs up to your point, Doogie, about how it can go. It's very easy for things to just go spiralling for Dortmund, and I like to use away form as a good barometer for a team's like mental strength and ability to churn results. A good team will obviously be exceptional at home, and they'll either be like good or still pretty damn good away from home, and that's where the mental stuff kicks in. That's where you overcome adversity. Different pitches, different crowds, different scenarios. It's harder, and Dortmund are. In the away table, they are 16th in the Bundesliga out of 18 teams. They have 5 points on the road this season. Leverkusen have just over, almost 4 times that. Bayern have literally 4 times that. And Leipzig have just over 2 times that. So these are the teams there, Bayern, Leverkusen, Leipzig, who Dortmund will say, yeah, we're competing with these teams. We're in the top 4 with these teams. They are wiping the floor with them in so many ways here, and away form is one of them. Even Leipzig, who have been pretty poor, have got 12 away points. Dortmund have 5. It's Holstein Kiel and Bochum who are worse. Holstein Kiel who just beat them 4-2.
It's crazy. They lost away at Holstein Kiel, as we said. They lost to Augsburg away. They lost to Mainz away, who are having a pretty good season. They also lost to Union Berlin. This is not what you expect of a Dortmund side. And just to briefly go back on finances, the Daily Mail claimed they've raked in £876 million since 2015. In that time, Mkhitaryan, Dembele, Aubameyang, Pulisic, Sancho, Haaland, Bellingham for major money. Look at the players they brought in for I would consider sizable fees since 2021. Max Bayer, Waldemar Anton, Seru Girassi, Felix Metscher, Seb Haller, Adeyemi, Schlotterbeck, Marlon. Of that list, how many would you classify as successes at Dortmund? I would say Schlotterbeck to a degree. I actually really rate Schlotterbeck.
I think he's been good. Yeah.
Other than that, I think Seru Girassi's done pretty well this year as well. Anton's had some injury issues, but those are not top of the range players, I don't think, at the moment. And you point to their away form, they also are so ill-disciplined as well. So only Augsburg, Union Berlin and Wolfsburg have picked up more than their 42 yellow cards this season. They've been sent off or had a player sent off 4 times this season, and we're halfway through the campaign. So Schlotterbeck was sent off in a 0-0 draw with Wolfsburg, Kabar was sent off in a 2-1 defeat away at Augsburg, Emre Can in a 3-1 defeat at Mainz, and Gross got sent off as they beat Wolfsburg. They've got as many red cards this season as they did in the entirety of last season. And the moment, or the season that I was talking about where Dortmund were at their recent best, 22-23, they didn't get a single red card. So that is clearly playing a role as well.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
My final point about managers is they're on to their 5th manager since December 2020. Lucien Favre, Edin Terzic the first time round, Marco Rose, Edin Terzic back again, and now Nuri Sahin as well. Edin Terzic has only ever managed at Dortmund. Nuri Sahin this is his second position. He otherwise managed in Turkey. I would say the highest calibre of manager they've had in recent years is Marco Rose, I would say. And he was only in charge for one season, which was 21-22. They finished second with 69 points. That's 5 more than the previous year. They scored 85 goals that year, and the Bundesliga obviously doesn't have many teams. That is a huge amount. It's their most in Bundesliga history. And obviously it was helped by, it was the last year of Erling Haaland. He scored 29 in 30. But he was fired after they were completely embarrassed in Europe. I don't know whether you guys remember, but they finished 3rd in that group with Ajax and then Sporting CP. They drop into the Europa League and they get humiliated by Rangers. And also in the run-in, they conceded 4 more goals to Leverkusen, Leipzig, Bochum from February onwards, and then also 3 against Bayern Munich. So they were leaking goals for sure, but I did think Marco Rose is probably the best calibre of manager they've got, and he kind of fell out with the board afterwards and ended up sort of walking, or it was kind of by mutual consent. It was all a little bit murky. But to replace him then back again with Edin Terzic and then go to Nuri Sahin, have they ever shown as much ambition in the managerial market as they did in the player market, say, 10 years ago? I really don't think so. For me, someone like Pochettino, who did so well at Spurs, a similar club with a similar reputation to Dortmund, why have they not got Pochettino in at some stage?
I don't actually know. I mean, there is a tendency in Germany and in the Bundesliga to recycle through about 20 names.
It doesn't matter to the same extent failure. You know, in the Premier League, we're obsessed with, you've got to succeed at your most recent club. The Bundesliga, they're far more forgiving.
Yes, that's right.
And I think it's a positive.
And teams go back in for a second and sometimes a third and fourth dip for certain teams on the same manager. But you always see the same names, the same 20 names being recycled through. It's always the short list of 5. Have you noticed this, Jack, as well? It's like there's a load of German coaches and they all manage German clubs and they just rotate. And there aren't that many non-German coaches in the Bundesliga. It might be changing a little bit now.
But it's starting to shift a little bit. But you're absolutely right.
For a very long time, it was just the same lads.
I think, just on Doogie's point there, I think if you go and you dug back through the archives of LBR Football Ranks episodes, I think we did almost an entire segment once on why Maurizio Pochettino should become the Borussia Dortmund manager. I think I can recall it now you say this. I do have one major thing on managers, in that I was okay with Dortmund parting company with Edin Terzic last year because we spoke about last year not being particularly sustainable, etc. But to get rid of Edin Terzic and to bring in someone with even less managerial experience when it felt like Dortmund were maybe a little bit too emotional under Edin Terzic. And look, I get that, the link to the club and the fact that he was obviously so tied to the fans and wanted to do well by them. Fine, all of those things are positives in the right light, but can end up with you being over emotional and all of those things. But to get rid of him and then bring in someone with almost no, yes, Nuri Sahin did a stint with Antalyaspor, but with almost no top-level managerial experience, felt like it's like the blind leading the blind. That, for me, was the weirdest part of them. I had no issue with them. We're parting company with Terzic.
I think that was the right call.
Yeah, and we often say this, right? Just because you get the next managerial appointment wrong, like Lopetegui at West Ham, that doesn't mean that sacking Moyes was the wrong decision.
No.
But it didn't work, and that's fine. You can accept those two things separately. But I do think that when they went away from Terzic, the obvious move was to bring in someone who was able to guide a squad that was a little bit discombobulated, a little bit all over the place, into a more cohesive whole. And instead, they just gambled on Nuri Sahin.
Well, so obviously, Sahin was kind of the understudy, wasn't he? So he'd been coaching at Dortmund through 2024 under under Edin Terzic.
He was supposedly the brains of their Champions League run.
And he was like promoted. So I guess they knew him. And you would usually, in normal circumstances, you would turn around and say, well, of course, they've got a really good look at him. They're very familiar with him. Of course, he's a former Dortmund player. But this is where emotion becomes a bit of a double-edged sword, doesn't it? And Dortmund probably fly a little bit too close to the sun more often than not on this. They love having managers, and in fact, they love having board members and front office members, directors of football and sporting directors and all that stuff. They like having those people to be connected to the club. Dortmund is full of ex-Dortmunders, right? And so Sebastian Kehl calling the shots with Lars Ricken. Lars Ricken played in the Champions League final, and Kehl obviously played in another Champions League final, and Nuri Sahin played for Dortmund, and Edin Terzic was on the yellow wall and coached. There's a very familiar theme running through it, and there are definitely times where it feels like the argument for competency is kind of pushed aside for almost fandom, but it's emotional connection. They really want to have that strong emotional connection from the pitch all the way through to the board, and they think they can achieve that using ex-players. However, it looks a little bit nepotistic at times because, from a qualitative perspective, I don't think Sebastian Kehl is doing a great job of building a squad. And I don't think Nuri Sahin qualified for this job and is doing a particularly good job, but I think there is a specific reason as to why he got it.
Just on a more tangential point, and to that, I don't think there's anything wrong with loyalty and people who understand the club being part of it. Like I think that is important, and that stops them completely and utterly losing their way. And I think that's equally important in things that we don't often talk about, like ticket prices remaining low. And I know that's not necessarily a problem in the Bundesliga as a whole, but keeping the club locked into its initial kind of thing, which is something that the Premier League and has lost generally, I think. But you look at what's going on at Manchester United at the moment, and I think that's a very clear indication of the club kind of straying from its roots. That won't happen with Sebastian Kehl and Lars Ricken and those people in charge. So there is there is credit to be given for that. I was just thinking though on that, Sahin comes in as the understudy and he takes over. How many managers have we now seen fail? Like even in just recent this season alone, coming in from understudy positions and stepping up and then be like, oh, not good enough. So we saw Ruben Amorim replaced at Sporting by his, well, not his former assistant, but by the man that was being kind of groomed to succeed him in João Pereira, failed, sacked within months. Vitor Bruno took over at Porto in the summer from Sergio Conceição, his right-hand man, sacked this week. Like, we've seen this like 6 or 7 times.
A bit of Ruud van Nistelrooy here, taking a top job and losing every game.
Maybe, but I mean like literally the understudy promoted. Right. Like, and so this, if Sahin goes this week, which is very plausible, and if he doesn't go this week, I think he'll be gone within the next month. That's going to be 3 managers in a season in big clubs in Europe, and that's just off the top of my head, who have decided to promote from within to replace a manager and really, really struggled to live up to the expectation that had been brought by that. Maybe there is something in not doing.
I think serves them right for skipping the human resources process, guys.
I think Sporting's a bit of a unique example because it was mid-season, but I do totally get that with FC Porto and Dortmund, because Sahin had a full pre-season. He was technically in charge of the transfer business as well. I mean, there are counter-arguments to that as well, like Kieran McKenna's now doing very well at Ipswich. He was a assistant manager. Maresca's been given an opportunity at Leicester and now Chelsea, assistant manager to Pep. Arteta got the job at Arsenal on the back of being an assistant
not assistant managers at the same club. That's what I'm getting at. Like the kind of immediate promotion from within. It's almost like when they get pinched and go somewhere else, they're able to kind of set up their own foundations a bit more, I think.
Yeah. The only one I can think of, like the understudy rising to the job, is Thomas Frank. And it was first of all, it was ages ago, but that's just testament to what a job he's done. But he succeeded Dean Smith at Brentford about, it must have been 7 years ago now. Got them up and has kept them there. Like he's done.
It took a long time for that to go right as well. Within 3 months, they wanted Frank out, and actually, it really started badly. If you look back at Thomas Frank's start, it really didn't go very well. But like obviously, what he's done and how he's turned it around is unbelievable, and he deserves immense credit.
Look at that.
But
praising Brentford.
No, 100%. But like he does deserve huge credit.
What's the time? What's the day?
No, it's not the 1st of April. We haven't got that far back in. But it is easy to forget that he did not start well. Like it took a while for that to work as well.
Yeah, there are some things going really wrong for him as well. What I would say finally on the overall, Sahin future point, actually we'll probably come back to it, but if he does get fired, I don't really put this down as just a pure Sahin thing. As we've already explained, the spending's not been enough. They've had so much turmoil. in terms of their managerial situation, it's just been absolute chaos. But there are real things going wrong with this side. Like only Guirassy and Gittins have scored more than 3 goals. Brandt and Bensebaini are the only players to provide more than 3 assists, and they got 4 each. They just aren't very clinical. They only get 33% of their shots on target. That's 13th in the league. And yet they rank 3rd for passes into the final third. But when they get to the final third, they're 8th for passes into the box. They're 9th for crosses into the box. They're not effective in the final third. And partly I think that's due to the fact that Adeyemi, Marlon, in a similar way to maybe Rashford and Garnacho, feel like they are looking for opportunities more for themselves than others. I don't think they're super creative players. And they're also making errors at the other end of the pitch as well. Eintracht and Wolfsburg are the only teams to make more errors leading to a shot this season. They've made 13, Dortmund that is. Leverkusen have made 7, so nearly double Leverkusen's amount. And in terms of quality on the ball, only 4 sides can top their 270 missed controls. Only 3 sides have been dispossessed more. This is just not a side that is functioning on the ball particularly effectively in the final third, and they are making errors when they don't have the ball.
So just to chuck in there as well, because I've got those are great stats, but I've got one too.
Go for it.
Last Friday when they played Eintracht, 666 passes completed, which is the 19th most in any Bundesliga game this season. They are the only team of those top 20 games, of the most passes, to have lost.
Wow.
They don't do anything with the ball.
It's
and I read the match report from that. And it was just the word sideways was written about 6 times. That's it. It's so poor. It's so poor.
What happens next, Sam? Because whatever happens with this Bologna game, Sahin is under pressure. He might be fired this week. It might be in a month's time. Maybe not at all. But there are links with Erik ten Hag.
Yeah.
There are links with Marcus Rashford as well. There might be more clarity by the time this podcast goes live. But he's in the discussion for a move there, which again feels a bit strange.
Marcus Rashford's not. He's got even less experience of management than Nuri Sahin.
No, as their left winger. Very good, very good. But Sam,
Can you imagine? They're like, right, we're
going to give it Rashford.
It's the nuclear option, lads. Marcus Rashford to
He's
the
the people's champion. Sam, I want your take on Ten Hag going there, Rashford going there. What would you do if you were the Dortmund board?
If I was the Dortmund board, I'd probably sack myself and appoint a new board. Because I think, overarching here, we've got bad tactics at play, we've got probably poor management, inexperienced management, but we've got bad squad building, we've got unambitious transfer work, and it is undermining everything that can possibly happen following that. Mm-hmm. So yes, Sahin I think is doing a poor job, but ultimately when he's only got 3 fullbacks to choose from, and one of them is Bensebaini, who's just playing so terribly, you do feel handcuffed a little bit, right? So all of this is going wrong. Poorly run from the top, and it always drips down. So there is no single managerial appointment or one single transfer that can fix this, unfortunately. It would be really nice to see them buy a defender. Any defender. I saw links to Renato Vega of Chelsea recently. He's been okay for Chelsea, most of the Europa duty, but he's been okay. He's left-footed. Plays centre-back and left-back. That sounds good to me.
Midfield as well.
Anything to get Bensebaini off the pitch at this point, and then, conversely, maybe Jan Koto onto the pitch a little bit more. I don't think we've seen enough of him, to be honest with you. Lots of squads, but not many appearances. But yeah, from a managerial perspective, you'd be asking someone to come in and work miracles. I don't think Erik ten Hag is going to come in and have a massive impact on this team. I think Roger Schmidt is a fantastic manager, and I personally would just love to see him go to Dortmund. But I wouldn't expect him to turn this ship around in the next 2 months. I think you'd have to understand that the really hard work takes place in the summer, because what does Roger Schmidt coach? Heavy pressing.
Yeah.
Can you get a team to adjust to a heavy pressing schedule, an effective heavy pressing schedule in January? No, you just missed the window to do that. It was called the winter break. You have them in Germany. So there's nothing they can do about this. They're just going to drift through this season in an incredibly mediocre and underwhelming way. And then in the summer, there probably needs to be a bit of movement above the manager before anything can really change. But I don't mean to be too downcast, but I just don't see a way out of this. I don't see how Dortmund can really get back into contention for anything serious here. They're already out of the Pokal. They went out really early to Wolfsburg. They are actually ticking along again quite well in the Champions League, and a win against Bologna could do a lot for them. Same as last season then, get yourself up for that big game, maybe run on emotion, but can't string it together on a week to week. And who could change that? I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like they are kind of relying on the other contenders outside of Bayern to kind of implode. Maybe Xabi Alonso leaves Bayer Leverkusen in the summer. Maybe Florian Wirtz leaves Bayer Leverkusen in the summer. Maybe that paves a way for Dortmund to get back into the top 4 by almost default. Maybe Eintracht Frankfurt really struggle without Omar Marmoush. We're not quite sure. Leipzig as well, super up and down this season, as you point out. Marco Rose was under huge pressure for his job just before Christmas. Looks like he's just about rescued it. They've now got Xavi Simons back, but Sesko and Openda are out now as it stands. They're now linked with Tyler Dibling, which is a move that I absolutely love, to be fair.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
It'd be great to see him go to the Bundesliga, but that is a side note from Dortmund. The thing is that Bayern now look in a really good position going forward as well. That Michael Olise transfer has just worked out absolutely seamlessly as well. And there will be a bit of change at Bayern in the summer as well, I think. A few of those wingers, Gnabry, Sane, maybe even Coman as well, feel like they might be in the final 6 months. So I can see Bayern going big in the summer. It looks very difficult for anyone aside from Bayern to win the Bundesliga. But having said that, Bayer Leverkusen, I think, won on 8-8. They're doing really well as well. It doesn't feel like a very vintage Bundesliga season this year, to be honest. Outside of Bayern and Leverkusen, the standard from third and below, I don't think is amazing.
But that's just to be honest, Dortmund languishing down in 10th is a reason why it doesn't feel vintage. Because a vintage Bundesliga season has Dortmund trying and probably failing in the end, but giving it a really good go.
They need to implode in March.
But they need to be in a position to implode. They've already done it. They're already down there. That's why it doesn't feel vintage.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see what happens there. I mean, Gittins as well, the speculation around him this January feels like if he carries on, if he backs up what he did in the first half of the year with the second half and they're outside the Champions League, Jamie Gittins is on his way for sure. He has looked absolutely electric, scored in big games this season as well. So that's a problem going forward. But it is really troubling times at Borussia Dortmund.
It is indeed. Right, that's the verdict. No fix. Nothing. It's over.
That's hard. It's hard to swallow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look, I do wonder. Look, I agree with you on Roger Schmidt. Like, that is definitely not the answer. This squad is not built for.
It could be the answer in the summer.
Yeah, it could be the answer in the summer, but there's not the answer right now. Like, the problem with the Ten Hag appointment is that I don't know what a Ten Hag team looks like anymore. Like the variations that we have now seen within his capabilities and the kind of inability to push a style onto Manchester United means that, yeah, he could go in there and look, he might be successful. I don't think he has become a dreadful manager overnight, and maybe somewhere where he's required to have a little bit less of a kind of say and front up the fans quite as much while everything burns in the background. Yeah. Maybe that gets the best out of him in a different way to what we've seen. But I'm still kind of struggling to sit there and be like, yeah, definitely, that's the right thing to do.
I've got a name to throw out there. I'm going to just leave it in the ether as we wrap up this podcast. Andoni Iraola.
Why would he leave Bournemouth?
Dortmund is Dortmund, man.
For Borussia Dortmund?
For Borussia Dortmund,
I think he'd
come
do
on.
it.
Is he going to get a top 6 job in the Premier League?
Right now? And then look at Borussia Dortmund.
Get him in for the summer. That is an exciting
triple
appointment.
Deal. Iraola, Heisen and Zabarnyi. Triple deal.
Huge. Yeah, that might sort of thing. I tell you what, there, you've stepped on the face. But also, like, can we stop trying to sell all Bournemouth's players? They're all really good and Bournemouth having a great time.
True.
No, I'm fine with this. Quadruple deal. They're taking Ryan Christie.
I was going to say nothing operates without Ryan Christie.
Because the last time they had a Scottish midfielder, they were pretty phenomenal.
They were indeed.
As bad a manager as Paul Lambert is, he was a phenomenal player.
He was a very, very good footballer.
Bring him back as manager.
All right, so that's we've cracked it. Dortmund are struggling because they don't have any Scotsmen.
We have had a message genuinely from a listener who is a Bournemouth fan being like, stop trying to sell all of our players.
Okay.
Like,
have I tried to sell anyone, or is it just you?
Well, no, I think it's been just everyone being like, wow, he's really good. We're all guilty.
I just sold.
We're all guilty of doing this a little bit. Like, when a player's doing really well for a small team, you're like, oh, where could he go next? And actually, it's a bad thing. It's a bad look for everyone. And when it happens to like Anthony Robinson, obviously I get well mad. So I do feel like Bournemouth fans.
I work for a YouTube channel that made all its revenue off doing exactly that.
I trained myself out of doing this, but it's similar. English player X is playing well, and then you just end every sentence with, and surely he's knocking on the door of the call-up. What's he got to do to get called up? Yeah. It's just such a silly way to speak, and I've trained myself out of doing it, but I haven't quite managed to not sell Bournemouth players. So I claim I don't, but I just try to orchestrate a quadruple deal.
Yeah. Take it as a compliment,
Let's let Bournemouth have a go at the Europa League before we sell any of their players, I think, at this point.
Fine. Okay, well, To that one Bournemouth fan in particular, if you are listening, I am sorry. To everybody else, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. All of it, even the bit where we tried to orchestrate a quadruple deal at the end. Andoni Iraola to Borussia Dortmund is not a bad idea at all, Doogie. Maybe,
I like it.
Maybe. I think it will be Roger Schmidt, but I don't think we're going to see any improvement from Dortmund, unfortunately, until the summer, where they get the chance to hit a hard reset, and there still needs to be further moves above the manager's head for that to even happen.
Sell them all. Sack the board.
Sell them all and sack the board. Good. Right, Doogie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Sam.
Jack, thank you for watching over us.
Always a pleasure, Samuel.
And thank you for listening. We will see you next week.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.